Hi, I'm Norma Foster of Foster Conscious Business, where commercial clarity meets conscious leadership and where we bring head and heart together to build businesses that thrive with integrity, impact, and ease. To me, leadership today is about so much more than strategy and results. It's about presence, connection, and the courage to evolve, especially in a world shaped by rapid change and emerging realities. That's why I'm particularly excited about today's conversation with the co-creator of the Mixed Reality Leadership Framework, Dr. Maitland Hyslop. Dr. Maitland Hyslop is a highly respected strategist, author, and speaker in the fields of organizational security, resilience, and strategic leadership. With a PhD in organizational security, he is a top-rated visiting lecturer in cybersecurity, intelligence and business administration, and a former executive in the UK NHS, global oil and gas and packaging sectors. His career spans combat operations, anti-terrorism, high-level consulting, and academic research. He has advised governments, regulators, and critical infrastructure providers across the UK, GCC, and the US. Dr. Hyslop has been directly tested in the pursuit of change, having been kidnapped 4 times during operational reform in unstable environments. These lived experiences inform his compelling insights into leadership, risk, and system transformation. He is the author of Critical Information Infrastructures, Obstructive Marketing, The Invisible Apocalypse, On War, The Threat to Britain, The Elephant in the Boardroom, and in 2025, about to be published, Mixed Reality Leadership. His talks bridge geopolitical risk, organizational resilience, and executive decision-making in an AI-disrupted, conflict-prone world. Maitland, thank you so much for being here.
It's a real pleasure, Norma, especially when you mention things like heart, because at the heart of this program is a change of heart in the way that businesses are run. And hopefully we'll develop that theme as the podcast goes on.
Yeah, business by heart. I couldn't agree more. So let's begin with the fundamentals. You've introduced this new term, mixed reality leadership, or MRL. What is it and why now?
Well, mixed reality leadership reflects the fact that businesses and organizations these days have to operate in a mixed world of the physical environment, the mixed world of the virtual environment, and the mixed world of the metaverse, or these new environments that have been created through augmented and extended reality. And when we started to look at how businesses and organizations are functioning in this environment, we found there are a number of shortcomings. And so mixed reality leadership tries to look at those 3 environments, physical, virtual, and the sort of metaverse environments together, and identify what sort of new leadership is required to manage those 3 things together. I'm sure as we go through the podcast, we'll understand that there are some businesses which have failed immensely to deal with these 3 areas. Why now? Well, now is a critical time for businesses and organizations, partly because big tech have introduced so many applications for business, which are actually built on a fairly unstable foundation. And so not only do businesses and organizations have to manage the organizational issues that they face from these three combined areas, but they also have to face the fact that those environments have become externally unstable. And what I mean by that is the threat from cyber attacks, ransomware attacks, destabilization, the fact that war is no longer singularly about physical conflict, but it's about virtual conflict, it's about soft power conflict. So the whole world has changed, and at the moment the world is in a very vulnerable and unstable place, and I and my colleagues think that mixed reality leadership can help leaders in particular get over some of the challenges that have been created by this new environment.
So this is not just about the technology, is it?
No, as you mentioned in your introduction, people are important. And people are even more important in a mixed reality environment than they might have been in a physical environment, which is why, for example, transactional leadership doesn't really work in this new environment. You have to bring people with you. And so we've worked with a headhunter company called Saxton Bamfylde, and we've taken their 2021 model for boards and applied it within this mixed reality leadership context. And we discovered from some research that those who take the people issue of the Saxton Bamfylde model seriously are the ones which are winning in this new environment. So your introduction was very apposite to certainly the people-focused bit of mixed reality leadership, the Saxton Bamfylde way of approaching things, and of course between us, because we've done some of these things between us before, it becomes a real joy for us to be doing this with your 40 years of people focus in business and mixed reality leadership as this new concept. They merge well together.
So with this new style leadership lens of mixed reality leadership, what does that actually mean in practice?
Yeah, well, a lens is a good way of describing it. It's a new lens on the world, certainly on the business and organizational world. And what we're looking to do in the context of mixed reality leadership is try and remove some of the silo thinking that pervades businesses and organizations and has for centuries, certainly decades. Because if you look at a business in a silo, from a silo mentality, you miss looking across the system. And mixed reality leadership is not so much a strategy, it's more, if you like, a doctrine, or if we put it in cyber terms, it's probably an orchestration layer that sits over the top of every other management process in the business. But it's focused on leadership. So it's really directed at the C-suite. So all the C-suite members must understand what we're talking about here and act collectively together to deliver what is a new way of looking at leading an organization. One of the current difficulties with organizations is that the C-suite itself tends to be siloed. And I'm sure later on in the podcast we'll come to examples. Now, not only is the what important, the what being this leadership redefined approach, but the who is also important. And the who is, in terms of leadership, it's about the C-suite. It's about changing the way they look at things in their organization and in their business ecosystem. Now, why we're doing this? Why is it important now? Well, it's important now because, as I explained a little earlier, the world is in a very unstable place, and we'll come to some examples a bit later on.
So how does all of this relate to your very copious previous work and books and such like?
Well, I think there are two answers to that. The first is, firstly, a bit like your 40 years, I've spent 40 years looking at leadership issues one way or another, either from a practical or a theoretical perspective. And I started in this journey, if you like, in 2007 with a book called Critical Information Infrastructures, where I came to the conclusion that the critical information infrastructures were not so much about the technical bits. It was, as we keep saying, about the people bit. It was about people. It was about values. It was about trust. It's about all the things that bind people together. My next book was really about how businesses get stopped from doing what they want to do. So I wrote a book called Obstructive Marketing. And obstructive marketing sort of looks at a business and identifies the key points where they might be challenged from people from outside. But that book was very much about the physical world. It wasn't about the cyber world. So that led on to things like The Elephant in the Boardroom, which described how an organization from a cyber and digital perspective should manage itself. What was the real baseline for keeping yourself a little bit ahead of the game and being a little faster than the next guy, so you don't get caught up in a cyber attack or a ransomware attack, but you are a little bit more secure than the others. And that book mirrored, in some ways, the previous two by identifying the fact that it was about people. And then finally, I suppose, this latest book, which I've written with Amanda Goodger and John Greaves, describes how we take those two previous books, add in Amanda's and John's experience and yours, to create an approach to mixed reality leadership, which learns the lessons of those previous books. So that's a personal approach, if you like. Very briefly, the external approach is, as we've already described, it's because things have changed. We have these huge cyber criminal organizations which are often state-run, and if they're not state-run, they're probably state-sponsored organizations who are running these things. We've got an unstable internet infrastructure, and we've got national legal systems which are running perhaps 10 years behind the curve in terms of the way in which they operate their regulatory environment. And if you look at the top left of my screen, you'll see a logo there, and it's a white swan. Under one wing, there's a physical environment. Under the other wing, there's a cyber digital environment. And this reflects what I'm saying. The white swan, these events in businesses these days can be anticipated. So in both the physical and internet world, we need a combined way of approaching the problem.
So what does that future fit leadership actually look like across domains in this new world of mixed reality leadership?
Well, the leadership itself is different. That's the first thing. And the way in which the C-suite operates is also different. So if we remove the silos and introduce systems thinking, and I wouldn't say a more relaxed leadership approach, because the whole approach of mixed reality is extraordinarily disciplined, can be quite expensive, and needs some dedication. But in order to do that, you have to carry people with you. So a very big element in mixed reality leadership is trust, not only of your colleagues, but also of your staff. And it brings the staff into the C-suite, or at least into the board, so that there is a top to bottom means of communicating, directing, managing, communicating. And this, in some cultures, this is going to require a huge shift in thinking. Mm. The other thing is that we have to realize that probably the most important person in an organization today is the person, man or woman, who goes out for a drink and has a casual relationship with somebody for a while, and for some reason or other exchanges information about that organization with them, and then that causes some form of attack or means of infiltration to the organization. The social engineering bit of the cyber digital world is more important today than it ever has been. And so I hope that gives you a sense that mixed reality leadership is about a much more cohesive approach, and cohesive, combined, empathic, I think would be probably the best word to describe it, top to bottom and bottom to top, of approaching leadership. Of course, there are technical things in it, which we haven't got time to talk about today, but the technical things, plus the physical things, other physical things, have got to be combined with a new empathic-led, emotionally led approach.
Yeah, and it's that wonderful thing that Steve Jobs and even Einstein talked about, that mix between intellect and left brain academic thinking and intuition or gut instinct. So what is it?
Yeah, sorry, let me just interrupt you there. That's a really important point, because the issue with AI, and the thing that AI cannot do and will not be able to do, is the intuition, the creative bit of humans. And so you've really hit the nail on the head there, because that is one of the critical issues about mixed reality leadership.
Mm. And I couldn't agree with you more. In my opinion, you know, AI is best used to make us more human and to bring out that different side of us. So what is it that leaders, and this is a part that really sits close to my heart, what is it that leaders need to know or do differently?
Well, we can take an example, perhaps. If we look at a recent big issue in the United Kingdom, and we look at somewhere like Marks and Spencer, for example, who in early 2025 suffered a huge ransomware attack, as it turned out to be, caused by what also appears to be, in the context of this podcast, a social engineering issue and failure, then we find that there are a number of things that leaders have to do. And these are described in previous books and also this one. So if we look at the physical side of the organization, then we need to understand in terms of managing risk. Now, firstly, what the risk appetite of the company is, and secondly, how it's going to be organized to address that risk. And if we looked at Marks and Spencer's, we found that they were in the middle of a boardroom spat, for example. Doesn't really matter what it was about, but it was a spat. They also were taking over other companies at the time. So I'm not saying it was necessarily the case, but there were other things going on in Marks and Spencer's at the time that they got the ransomware attack. Now, from my perspective, from my academic perspective, I would say they should have been aware that that was a heightened threat environment. And it's not clear that they did think that way. On the cyber digital side, it was clear that the cyber digital side was not quite a poor relation, but maybe a bit of a poor relation, because the Archie Norman turnaround approach had been transformative on the physical side, but there had been no massive investment in the cyber digital side. And if we compare that with what happened in the United States with Walmart, for example, where there's been a huge investment in the cyber digital side from a comparative retail type organization, then we see that Marks and Spencer's were a little bit behind the curve on protecting their cyber and digital environment. So that's the first example, really, of the having to merge the two together and make sure they're managed in the same way. And there is an argument to say that it wasn't. There was another issue about these sort of consultancies as well being used. Oh, very competent. All these people are extremely competent, but it's just a way that they sort of missed the fact that mixed reality was there. Consultants, the technical people in the organization and the existing leadership of the organization, to blend all this together into a combined whole that looked at all sides through the same lens as were talking about earlier. So that, I think, means that leadership has got to shift. And the only way it can shift is if they know about it. Now, mixed reality leadership and our little center here is designed to help that. But if we looked at the business schools around the world, I think there are about half a dozen who have started to take this mixed reality approach seriously. But it's growing. So, for example, my colleague Amanda, her university is starting to take this seriously. They sponsors in some ways of this centre, University of Buckingham. They're beginning to take it seriously. Oxford University have talked to us about it. Cambridge have talked to us about it. So, you know, it's beginning to get some momentum, and there's a realization that this leadership issue at the top of organizations is not what the business schools were teaching 10, 20 years ago, and some of them obviously still, but it requires a new approach, and particularly in this age of AI. because AI is turning everything over very quickly. And so mixed reality leadership also helps to give some guidance through the AI revolution.
So, what's the core lesson that you would like our listeners to take away today?
Well, the core lesson, of course, is the world's changed in two different ways. First of all, it's changed from a leadership perspective, which hopefully we're going to address. But secondly, it's changed from an AI perspective. And if you're a leader of a business or an organization, particularly an SME, which doesn't have resources behind them to sort of bring to bear on these problems, the leader really has to take all of these things on board. And the problem is that unless you do that, you become not necessarily a target, but maybe collateral damage. So, for example, I live in Northamptonshire. And within Northamptonshire, there's a long-established transport business that's been killed off by ransomware demands, criminal activity, cyber criminal activity. Well, it's because they didn't understand this mixed reality leadership world sufficiently well. In another context, I know through working with people like Andy Jenkinson, who you can find on LinkedIn, and his pursuit of DNS failures in business, we know that most businesses have key points of failure, and they need to understand how to address those key points of failure. To give you an example, we're working with an institution in the Middle East last week, and we said, sorry, we can't help you with your desire for a secure network because the front end of your organization is open. Your DNS servers are open to the world. And unless you close those off, we can't come in behind that and build a secure network. So it's this understanding of, at senior level, how these work. And in that case, and in many other cases, projects come out, say, improve our security, but nobody's actually done the groundwork to understand where the vulnerabilities are.
So what is your call to action to the C-suite today? What would you like them to do?
Well, first of all, I'd like them to watch this podcast and also the podcasts that follow, because we're going to do some subsequent ones. Secondly, buy the book, Mixed Reality Leadership, which will be available from the 20th of August from the University of Buckingham Press and elsewhere. Thirdly, if they're of a mind, make us aware of the issues they've faced in this area so that we can understand better some of the issues that we may have missed and integrate those into forthcoming courses or discussions or podcasts. And I suppose lastly, to take away the fact that the environment has changed as we've described, but the key way to overcome all this at board level is to follow something like the Saxton-Banfile model. And in terms of running your organization, to make the people in it a key focus of what you're trying to do, and not, in inverted commas, just an employee. I think those are the key takeaways I think I would talk about, suggest.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Maitland. A powerful message for our times. We've heard today what it really means to lead in a world that no longer fits into neat categories. Mixed reality leadership isn't a buzzword. It's a way of seeing, deciding, and leading across every layer of your organization. So whether you're facing cyber risks, building your board, or preparing for what's next, this is an invitation to you to rethink what leadership looks like and what it demands of us now. Thank you for listening. I'm Norma Foster, and this is Mixed Reality Leadership.